the organization that eventually published the Oxford Reference Bible. And this is really a peculiarity because Oxford University Press was Anglophile and they had Americophobia. There had never been a writer of American descent or American upbringing who had been published by Oxford University Press. Oxford Press was very close to the English crown, and it was thought to be very close to Lord Rothschild, who of course was a powerful source in the new Zionist movement. But Oxford University Press was anything but pro-American, and it was anything but religious. It had never published a religious book, not even for some prominent religious theologians in England who were associated with Oxford University. Oxford Press would not touch a Bible, it would not touch a religious book. But it did publish Cyrus Scofield's Reference Bible off of his yellow notepads. Now, it should be most clear to most people that somehow Scofield had to have an introduction. He could not have simply found his way into Oxford Press, nor could he have found his way through this. And evidence is very strong that indicates that he did have support and that he was helped along the way by a number of people. This man is Theodor Herzl. The name of his famous book, written in 1895, was the Judenstaat, or the Jewish State in English. Herzl is the founder of the Zionist movement. He was the first true Zionist, and he dreamed of a homeland for the Jewish people. Herzl was a writer. He wrote for a prominent European newspaper. He was a respected man, and he died at a very young age after only 4 or 5 years of working on founding the Zionist movement. And by the way, he died heartbroken and feeling that he had failed, because he was completely rejected by the people who came along behind him. Theodor Herzl was not committed to the idea of a Palestinian state. He wanted a Jewish state, and he wanted it anywhere that they could get it. He was willing to take Uganda, or he was willing to take some other place where a space was available where Jewish people could go to start their own religious state. Now, in 1897, the first Zionist conference took place in Bern, Switzerland. And at this conference, Herzl was the leader. But 5 years later, Herzl was no longer a factor in the Zionist movement, and the Zionist movement was absolutely committed toward the idea of a state in no other place except Israel. There is very strong reason to believe that there was a connection between the Zionist movement and Cyrus Scofield. The reason for this is that Cyrus Scofield wrote a blueprint for the Zionist movement to take over the land of the State of Israel. He wrote it into a Bible that became so powerful that it was used in every seminary in America, and it became one of, if not the most famous Bible in America. The reason it was so famous was that it was used more in the new evangelical seminaries than any other Bible, perhaps, in history, and still is used today extensively in evangelical seminaries, such as the Baptist theological seminaries.
The Scofield Reference Bible was copyrighted in 1909. It is an Old Testament and a New Testament, but with most of the notes in the original text being to the Old Testament. Later, many notes were added to the New Testament as the text was re-edited. The cover shows that the editor was Cyrus C.I. Scofield, and there were 7 other men on the editorial board. One of these was Reverend James M. Gray, who was the president of Moody Bible Institute, one of the most influential Bible organizations in evangelical circles of the day. There were also 2 other seminary leaders on the editorial board. These people lent their name to the Scofield Bible and were predominantly in seminaries and held important Bible teaching positions. Now, what is the Scofield Reference Bible?
We're looking at some verses that are standard verses that you'll find in any King James version of the Bible, and they're about the same in almost any Bible that you'd read. This is Genesis 12:3. Let me just read it in paraphrase. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Get you out of this country and from your father's house, and into the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you shall be blessed, and I will bless them who bless you, and curse him that curses you, and in you shall all the families of the earth be blessed." This is Genesis 12:3, and it's the earliest verse of the covenant that God made to Abraham. And of course, Christians believe that this has really happened, that God really made this covenant. And the reason we believe it, the reason we Christians believe this, is much different than the reason that Jews believe it. We believe it because it says that all the families of the earth will be blessed through Abraham. And we believe that that blessing meant that there would be a Messiah, and his name would be Jesus Christ, and in him would be the blessing for all of us that we would carry forward. If it were not for this, we'd have no reason to even recall who Abraham is or what Abraham did, for his importance to Christians is only found in the fact that he is in the lineage of the man called Joseph, who was the stepfather of the man called Jesus. Now, I want you to take a look at this footnote, and before you read the raised part of it, I want you to notice that the bottom part of the page is all footnotes, and the top part of the page is the text itself, and even that is carved up a little bit because there's a column down the middle, and there are even italicized insertions in between the verses. We'll see this a little bit later. What I want to point out to you that here in this 1967 version of the Scofield Bible, a minute ago we looked at the original 1909 version, but in this 1967 version of the Scofield Study Bible, the footnotes have grown to where they vastly outnumber the text in these very important pages. Let's look at the footnote that's found in the Scofield Study Bible in 1967. It says, God made an unconditional promise of blessing through Abram's seed to the nation of Israel to inherit a specific territory forever. Let's read that again. God made an unconditional promise of blessing through Abram's seed to the nation of Israel to inherit a specific territory forever. Genesis 12:3. Now, the passage basically does not say that God is giving any piece of land to anybody forever. Furthermore, it doesn't say anything about Israel. And in fact, if we consider history for a moment, we know that Abraham had no children when this happened, and he didn't have children for quite a while, and when he did, the second generation after him, his grandson, became named Israel. So there was no person named Israel. There was no state, no nation named Israel. There was absolutely nobody that was connected with Israel at this time, since the man Israel did not even exist when this statement was made. How is it that Scofield, or I should say Oxford University Press, had the nerve to say that God was promising land to the state of Israel forever, to the nation of Israel forever? Obviously, somebody wrote this who had an interest in the nation of Israel, and it didn't have anything to do with Jesus coming to the earth, did it? It should be noted at this point that Cyrus Scofield died shortly after he wrote this book. By 1921, he was dead. But after 1921, the Oxford University Press became the owner of his Bible, and they went right on making changes in it as though Scofield was still there, still leaving Scofield listed on the cover as being the editor of the book. But Scofield is gone. And so Oxford Press went ahead and wrote these changes in, which basically are the kind of changes that Theodor Herzl or his successors would have wished that somebody would write into the Christian Bible. Let's go on with some more of the Scofield study notes to this Genesis 12:3. As I told you, there's a lot of notes, so we'll read further. Read the next one. Note number 3 says, there is a promise of blessing upon the individuals and nations who bless Abram's descendants, and a curse laid upon those who persecute the Jews. Now we have Oxford University Press entering the Jews into footnotes to something that was written long before there was a word called the Jew, which did not even exist in the days of Abram. In fact, Jew is taken from the word Judah, or Judean, and Judean is taken from the word Judah, and Judah was one of the 12 grandsons of Abram. So Judah didn't exist either, and the word Jew didn't exist. And so how is it that Oxford University Press is putting words in the mouths of the readers of this Bible to think that there is a promise of blessing made to the Jew? Then we read further. It's still footnote 3. God's promise to Abram and his seed certainly did not terminate at Sinai with the giving of the law. The New Testament and Old Testament are full of post-Sinaitic promises concerning Israel and the land, which is to be Israel's everlasting possession. So here in 1967, they've changed the Oxford Study Bible to say that the land is to be the property of the state of Israel forever. But there was no state of Israel in 1909 when Cyrus Scofield wrote the original Bible, and in his original notes there is no mention whatsoever of the state of Israel. All of this is hatched up and added on conveniently into the later editions of the Bible after the Oxford Press took over. Let's read further. We're still reading footnotes to Genesis 12:3. Promise to the Gentiles. I will bless them that bless thee. Those who honor Abram will be blessed, and curse them that curse thee. This was a warning literally fulfilled in the history of Israel's persecution. Here we're talking about the state of Israel's persecution. It is invariably fared ill with the people who have persecuted the Jew, and well with those who have protected him. And here is the punchline. For a nation to commit the sin of anti-Semitism brings inevitable judgment. Future will still more remarkably prove this principle. I must repeat that. If a nation commits the sin of anti-Semitism, it will be subject to inevitable judgment. So says the footnotes to the Oxford University Press Bible. Isn't that convenient? That means that as a country, if the nation of America does not properly honor the nation of Israel, that our whole country is to be considered in sin, and that we are considered to be in line for judgment from God for not being properly friendly to the nation of Israel. This is what has been written over and over again into the footnotes of the Oxford University Press Bible. And of course, remember, there was no Jew in the time that Abram was taught. There was no Israel at the time that Schofield wrote the original notes to this Bible. And Schofield would not have even understood what they were talking about if someone would have told him that there was going to be a Zionist state of Israel in 1948 and that he was writing a Bible that had to do with that. The people that did have something to do with this, of course, were a world Zionist movement. Samuel Untermeyer was the leader of this movement. And Samuel Untermeyer, of course, was part of the movement that did many things in the administration of Woodrow Wilson, had a very powerful influence on getting the United States into World War I on the side of the British against the Germans. He had a very powerful effect upon getting Judge Brandeis appointed to the Supreme Court, and we're not going to go into that in the little bit of time we have here, but it's very important to know that this leading Zionist, Mr. Samuel Untermeyer, the most prominent Zionist in New York, an attorney, knew Cyrus Schofield. Cyrus Schofield knew him, that Cyrus Schofield was ushered into a very private club that Samuel Untermeyer was a membership chairman of, and that Mr. Schofield kept this secret through his entire life, and it was not found out until after his death that he was a member of Samuel Untermeyer's club. We think there's probably reason to believe that Samuel Untermeyer and those who put up the money for the powerful Zionist movement in America wanted the American Christian faith to accept the state of Israel as a reality in the world, and that they were planning for this long before Cyrus Schofield even dreamed that there could possibly be a state of Israel, which he never dreamed it. I was recently asked by some people at a conference if I thought that Cyrus Schofield was a Zionist, and my answer was, I don't think so. I think he was simply an opportunist, an incredibly ambitious man who was willing to do anything that was needed in order to get ahead, and a man who could keep a secret, and a man who could lie with a straight face, anytime, any place, and not be the least bit bothered by it. That was the kind of man that Cyrus Schofield was. It was very unlikely that he ever knew that he was laying the groundwork for a Zionist state, and that millions of people would come to their death because of what's happening, because of his words in the Middle East.